Attention! Yeah, hello, that's the Friday news here. So what you just heard is what you might have heard in your company in one way or the other. Someone stands up and say, you all now listen to my command. Everyone at my command. And this is something we hear frequently at the moment because especially in nowadays times, we have leaders who think it is a good idea to say we all have to do exactly the same. We heard all the government commands where it says we all have to stick together, we all have to be alert and better the situation, etc., etc. Really bad is it when you have someone of your highest advisors who then does not stick to these rules, but that's a different story, and we did a podcast about one of these examples in the recent past. So when you have one of these leaders and they say, you all have to listen to my command, it is remarkable that this normally fails instantly. So people just sit there, listen to it, and then they actually organize each other in a completely different way. No one listens to that person's command because these kind of commands are not only outdated, they completely miss the mark you want to hit. So the question is, how can you do it better? So there are three main aspects, and of course, as usual with every podcast, I'm going to tell you how to do it better at the very end. So the first thing are the presumptions. There are some presumptions people have which are just wildly wrong. There are certain mistakes people do, and then of course we have to see how to do it better. So the assumption you have, first assumption is people say leadership will be accepted. And then you think that leadership will be expected in most cases because you think someone tells you that's your leader, and then people say, okay, that's my leadership person, I'm going to listen to that person commands. That might work for the first couple of weeks, and people orient themselves when they're new to the organization. They want to figure out how is everything going on here, but it doesn't last for long because when you try to convince people only by being the leader and they told you to listen to that person, you also think that leadership is hierarchical. And when you think that leadership is hierarchical, and then of course, I know that immediately people say, oh, but in Japan they have, there are some cultures where they are still very obedient. But in many countries now, you have a new generation coming up and they are less obedient than the generations we had before. So when you think leadership is hierarchical, that's error number two. So error number one is you think leadership will just be accepted because you tell them to do so. Error number two is you think that leadership is hierarchical, which it is not. And error number three is you think that leadership can't be changed quickly. And there are certain organizations which still say, oh, we change quite slowly, and you have to accept that things take a while here. So when you think this still works, here are the bad news. Most likely people only stay with you for certain reasons. Number one is you pay an extraordinary amount of money, and in times of insecurity, they prefer to take the money, but then prefer to leave straight afterwards. Reason number two might be you work for an organization which is good on everyone's CV, so they're going to work for you for a year and then leave, and they plan to do so from the very first moment they work with you. And reason number three, they might be at the moment they have some sort of either financial or family or whatever pressure that keeps them inside your organization, which means they're completely distracted, but they stay with you basically because they have to. Just right now and just yesterday, I had a phone call with a young man who's now in his mid-20s, works for a really good job in a large corporation, on the way to become a leader, and management is severely misbehaving, and he's now leaving. And not only leaving the company, he's actually leaving the whole city he's living in. He now lives in London. He's going to move to a completely different country, and that aged mid-20s in the midst of a pandemic. So these are the risk takers we have right now. So when you think they will stay for whatever reason, most likely they won't. When there is not massive pressure from different situations outside the work, they will leave you and you will have to pay the money to recruit again. And that, as we all know, is very expensive because when you recruit someone, it takes quite a while until they're able to work productively. So don't assume that leadership will be expected. Don't assume that leadership is hierarchical, and don't assume that leadership can't be changed quickly, because when it can't, you have to change your organization. So what are the errors we have here? Error number one is you think that leadership is accredited and accepted on a hierarchical level. It's not. It's a social thing. People follow people they know they are able to do the job properly, where they can learn something. I'll just give you an example. In nearly every organization, you have people in certain departments who have the whole department fully under control. They are very popular, people like to work in the department, and they follow that leader over any command. They follow the department leader over the command of the board of directors if they can, because these people are, and it's called opinion leadership, they are socially legitimized. People know that this is the right person to follow, and they stick together. So error number 1 is you think leadership is hierarchical. No, it's social. So step number 2 means, and that of course is the error number 2, you think that leadership is a construct which is based on a hierarchical pyramid where people have titles. So error number 2 is you think someone cares about your title. No, no one does. No one who is out of the first couple of weeks where they oriented themselves how the organization works, no one cares if you're a department leader or a team leader or you are a director or a head of whatever you are. Even when people tell you that they care, most of them don't. They say yes, and then they turn around and then they try to figure out, okay, how do I get this done without the incompetent person? Have you ever thought why it is the case when you ask salespeople, hey, you're going to visit a really important client next week. Do you want that the sales manager comes with you? And they say, hell no. And the reason for that is because most salespeople who are on operational level, sitting in front of clients 5, 10, 15, 20 times a week, they know better how to lead these discussions than their own sales manager does. And when the sales manager suddenly comes with them, they normally do something they don't like, and then we have problem after problem after problem. So leadership is always based on opinion leadership. So when you cannot convince people socially, they will not follow you. The reason why all these new and modern companies are so successful is because their founders showed in the first place that they can do it by themselves. And that they are not some manager who will be there for 4, 6 or 8 years and then just walk on and go to the next FTSE 500 or DAX when you're in Germany, FTSE 100 if you're in the UK, or NASDAQ when you're in the US. You know, these kind of stock exchange companies. When you are one of these managers, people only follow you when they are convinced that you care about the business and that you're able to do something of value to the business. And error number 3 is that you think that leadership can't be changed by short notice. Leadership today is highly dynamic. In one project, a very low, in high commas, low-level team leader can be very important, has a major leadership role, while other people step back. And in another project, suddenly the CEO is very important and does jobs which normally are not part of his or her job. And that is something which now has to change way quicker. And I know which kind of excuses are coming up now. You will say, oh, because some of you might say, not all of you, some of you might now say, well, we are quite traditional business. Or you might say, we are owner-led, it takes a while. Or you might say, we're a huge corporation, nothing's quick here. Okay, look, when you can't change quickly, do you know what is the reason why I have my financials with modern banks that basically work from an app on my mobile phone? Because I can't deal anymore with the slow processes and the mindset of the people who work in these banks who still think that I am interested in their pieces of paper, because I'm not. Other banks are able to do it quicker. That's why I am with them. And if you are not able to adapt and change quickly, you will be in massive problems in the near future, because digitization got a huge push during the COVID-19 pandemic. So of course, now I want to talk about how to do it better. So step number 1, when you say everyone listens to my command, you always give a good reason. And either it is you who gives a good reason, or you can, for example, say, this is the reason why the company has to do it, but there are additional reasons, and then you pass over to someone else. I'll just give you an example. When Angela Merkel talked to the Federal Republic of Germany, and she says we have to wear masks and we have to do social distancing, that is because the numbers are now rising slowly, but we have to keep it under control, because otherwise we have to do the lockdown again, etc., etc. The virology reason is, and then she passes over to Professor Drosten, who is one of the lead virologists in the whole world, meanwhile, who tells people why they have to do so. You don't have to do everything by yourself. Give them a reason, but get help to get a good reason. There might be an organizational reason, and there might be a different reason. So just be sure that you give proper reasoning, and leadership communication is not something which you are born into. Leadership communication is something you learn by training, by coaching, or by whatever else process. So how to do it better, step number 2, Just accept that no one is interested in your position anymore. When you say, I am the head of blah, 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 so you have to obey me, that is the worst move of leadership you probably have then done in a very long time. When you just play the hierarchical card, it means you ran out of tools, methods, and ideas, so you only play the hierarchical card. It is like a referee in a football game who can only make people follow and obey them by him or her by yellow and red cards. And these games always escalate. And it's exactly the same in your organization. So don't start with your position. You are what they call in Latin primus inter pares, which, of course, people who had Latin in school, by the way, I didn't. I learned French at school. So primus inter pares means first amongst equals. That is your role. You are the first, and people know that. But you have to act as the first amongst equals. Just imagine that some person just thinks, oh, I'm head of blah, 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 or I'm the department leader of XYZ. Look at me. That's my business card. Can you see my badge? Can you read it there? This is embarrassing. So when you need your ego push, leadership is not for you. So no one is interested in your position. It is better to say primus inter pares, you're the first amongst equals. And step number 3 is accept when people do not follow you, because there will be some people who will not follow you for whatever reason. Then there are different ways how to handle that. Way number 1 is, of course, you communicate with each other, and then you either figure it out, or you decide that you have to replace someone, or you have to put someone into different roles for a certain project. Can be temporary, can be permanent. Or you have to admit that maybe you took a decision and say, this is the solution for the whole organization. And then you figure out, oh, for that department, it was actually wrong. No one will say a word against you when you simply say, I made a mistake. And this can happen. For example, when you have a very office-oriented culture, but you have one department for logistics where they do the packaging, the working world is completely different between these two entities. And it might be that you say, this is the solution right now, which we all stick to. And then you figure out, oh, for logistics or for sales or for marketing or for whichever department, maybe your solution was not suitable. And then you might put someone in power who can do certain adaptations. But it is important to say, hey, I think I saw that wrong, and I just trust you to interpret it the right way, and I hereby give you the power to do so. There is never anything wrong with saying, I made a mistake. People will hold it in your favor when you do it properly and honestly. So, very important now that when we wrap the whole thing up, when you say you order to listen to my command, always give a good reasoning and get help when you need an even better reason. You can always show up with multiple people to give multiple reasonings. Number 2 is, no one is interested in your position. Primus inter pares, act like the first amongst equals. And aspect number 3, accept when people do not follow you. I mentioned a couple of different solutions, and one of these solutions will be the one which you choose. And the longer you can work together with people who are able to do their job, because we all know replacing people is really expensive, because you have to hire someone else, get the job ads out there, do the interviews, all these processes take a while, and it costs normally about 1.2 times an annual salary of a position until you really have someone re-qualified and rehired on the position, just to get the same position productively running that you had before. So be careful what you do, because people normally like to stay with you as long as you behave properly. I wish you all the best when implementing this in your organization. And now, of course, in advance, I wish you a nice weekend. It's Friday, so I hope you're going to have a nice time off, a relaxing time off. For today, there's only one thing for me left to say. Thank you very much for your time.